Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to. Lots to talk about. 1 year ago today, we saw a bunch of angry Trump supporters, evangelical white Christians, lots of the white supremacy crowd. Well, we saw the MAGA hats out in full force in our nation's capital, violence, attacking our capital. And over the last year, what have we seen? A rewriting of that history. And I spent a little time today going back, thinking about the run up to that day and how the day before I said, look, there's chaos coming. And how on that day, I went back and actually pulled a couple of clips of exactly what I thought of the day. And it hasn't changed. The reality is we are exactly where I said we were back a year ago today, and I don't think anything's changed. Here's one of the clips from my opening a year ago. Remember the good old days when Michelle Bachmann and Sarah Palin were as crazy as the Republicans came? Remember the good old days when, well, at least there was some humor in their insanity? Well, today, what we saw today in our nation's capital is the manifestation of decades of right-wing nuttery, of a Republican Party that has been flirting and dancing with the devil, only to now have its soul ripped from its chest. And I'm sorry, I have absolutely no patience in this moment to hear from any Republican right now how they condemn violence and how they don't agree with what's going on. They've been courting this for decades. And I stand by that because it's who the party has become. This was all predictable. It was all predicted. And it's who they are now. There's no easy way back for the Republican Party. And today, their actions today, and we'll get into some of that, their actions today showed that. But, it's more than just, the Republicans. It's Trump. And until Trump is held accountable, I don't think anything really changes. But this is what I had to say a year ago about Donald Trump. I'm Rick Smith. Wrong one there. And I don't want to give Donald Trump too much credit. This is the problem I have. Because if you were shocked by what happened today in our nation's capital, if you were shocked by this armed invasion of our nation's capital, if this surprised you, you haven't been paying attention. If this is something that you go, oh my gosh, this is horrible, you haven't been listening to Donald Trump. This is what he's been saying he's been wanting for the entire 4 years. And it is. And then I went into this one, in my final clip here that I wanted to play. And today he came out in much the Trumpian fashion. Right at the very beginning of his little video that he put out, he said, I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. And you go, wait a second. You're supposed to be tapping down the invasion. Unless you want an insurrection, unless this is part of the bigger plan, unless this is part of the plan to declare martial law and then go to plan B. And that it was. And now, look, we didn't know all the things we know now. We assumed, we thought we knew, all the evidence was there. It was clear. Now we're seeing the memos. Now we're seeing the places where they put their treason. And this is where I talked about this yesterday. The fact that we need immediately to get to the bottom of this. This should have been much further down the road. These hearings should have been happening already. Politically, there should be more accountability. On the Merrick Garland front, I want this to move faster. It needs to move faster, but it needs to move at the speed it needs to move to hold people accountable. But here's the thing. There have been 725, 750 people who've been arrested, but none of them are the people who really matter in all this. Those 725, 750, they're all dupes. They're all the nitwits who organized we're gonna do what Donald wanted us to do. They're not the moneyed interests. They're not the people who funded this. They're not the people who were behind the scenes manipulating this stuff. And they're certainly not the people in the power positions. This was the result of years of planning. It was. This stuff has been gamed out in think tanks. That's what they do. And it was what it was. It was a coup attempt. There is no other way of looking at it. Now, I spent some time, interestingly enough, listening and consuming right-wing media today, and all they could do was, well, talk about anything else, deflect. Oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. Oh, the George Floyd thing. Everybody else is to blame. My favorite argument came from one of the Limbaugh replacements, who said, well, there may have been some people who, wanted to overthrow the government, but they didn't really have the opportunity. Yeah, they did. There is a plan. Maybe you've read the memo that was in the hands of the person who held the highest office in the land. There was a plan. So this argument of, well, they may have wanted to, doesn't hold water. Now, like I said, I started my day off consuming some right-wing media. But I got an email from George from Florida. George. George. Yes, a man from Florida. He's not fond of my commentary yesterday on January 6th, and in his way, put that to words. A lot of misspellings, but I'm going to get through it. He writes, I watched your demented tirade about January 6th. The gathering in D.C. and cannot believe you are going to lie with a straight face about what happened. January 6th was nothing more than a family day of patriots exercising their God-given constitutional rights of free speech and to redress their government of grievances of a clearly stolen election. The evidence is all there, and then he sends me several links to angry YouTube people screaming and ranting and raving. I would put them out on social media, but I got to be honest, I'm not going to promote this kind of kookery. Just not going to do it. They're out there. You can find it. He goes on to say, facts you missed. Now, of course, I've edited the parts where there were lots of name calling and you get the picture. He says, facts you missed. The peaceful protesters were there to merely protest a rigged election. They did not storm the Capitol. They were invited in by the Capitol Police. That's a narrative I like hearing. They went through metal detectors, so we know they were completely unarmed. There was violence that day, but here it comes. Wait for it. It was Antifa and the FBI. So Antifa and the FBI are getting together. He says this was a false flag if there ever was one. Clearly, no one in this matter matters to you because you're a big fat liar. And you had to get that in there, and I left that in there because George needs that. If he truly believes, and I think this is just trolling. We've had George call our program a couple of times and troll from Florida, and this is one of those things where you go. Anyone who looked at what happened on January 6th, honestly and truthfully, what you saw were people who were there with the intent of stopping the certification of the election. That was their stated goal. That was the whole point of that rally, was to stop. And you had 147 Republican representatives who were on board with that. They didn't want to certify the election. They wanted to stop it. That was the intent of the day. So anyone who says no, it was a show of having our voice. It was a show of patriotism. It was a family day. It was a picnic day. It was us getting all dressed up in our costumes and running around. It was not that. That was not the intent. And if you were there for that, you evidently went to the wrong party. This was all about stopping an election from being certified. This was about stealing the vote from we the people and pushing it in a direction that would be advantageous for Trump. We see this in the writings, and we knew it at the time because he had already floated the idea of sending it to Congress, and Congress having more Republican states than Democratic states, and him being able to stay in power. That was always the plan B. Plan A, of course, was to ensure that secretaries of states in a handful of states overturned those elections and fined 12,000 votes to keep him in power so he can say he won the election, even though he lost by well over 7 million votes. And again, none of this stuff matters to the right-wing kooks, and I spend way too much time debating with them and talking to them, but this is what the reality is. These folks believe that the election was stolen because they keep hearing it over and over and over again from Donald Trump and the right-wing media in this country, who get to hide behind freedom of the press when they lie. And that's part of the problem. And look, I'm not saying we change our rules, but we be better consumers. Just my thought. Now, the president gave a speech today. I thought he gave a very powerful speech. I think it was one of his better public speaking moments. I'm not a fan of putting him in front of the microphone for extended periods of time. But I thought he did a good job. He pointed out that Donald Trump lost the election 5 times, which I thought was good. I thought it was important that he pointed out that he's not just a former president, he's a defeated former president. I thought that was a good shot, because at some point you've got to go after these people on their grounds. And I thought the speech was very powerful. I thought it was one that said, hey, look, we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to hold people accountable. And I think it reassured some people like me who are going, this is taking too long. I fear this ends up like all of the other crimes of the past by anyone. I think back to the Reagan era. I think back to the end of the Bush era. I think back to all the Wall Street banksters that got away with their crimes because nobody went back and held them accountable. This gives me a little bit of hope that, you know what, we're going to go after this, because this was different. And I think the president hit it when he said, look, for the first time in our history, a president has not just lost an election. He tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power as a violent mob breached the Capitol. But they failed. They failed. And yes, they failed this time. And again, I look at today and I keep coming back to, with all of the craziness that's going on, the Republican Party, if you notice today, was nowhere to be seen. There were 2 Republicans at the House of Representatives, Liz Cheney and her father. Dick Cheney, I'm going, when did the soul, when did the savior, when did the hope of the Republic go back to a Cheney? But Cheney said that he was deeply disappointed. We don't have better leadership in the Republican Party to restore the Constitution. That's coming from Dick Cheney on the day where no Republicans showed up to any of the things. And in fact, the people on the radio were mocking the fact that there was going to be a candlelight vigil. Now, these are the people who thoughts and prayers, candlelight vigil for everything. And yet this, an assault on our nation, that's mock-worthy. It's quite Republican, isn't it? Especially given the fact that Matt Gaetz, and this is where we're going. You have Congressman Matt Gaetz, who was on the podcast of Steve Bannon. He said, we're ashamed of nothing. We're proud of the work we did on January 6th, and we're actually going to walk the grounds that patriotic Americans walked from the White House to the Capitol. It's no longer in their view, and this is one of the mouthpieces of the Republican Party, it's no longer that it was a bad thing. They no longer shy away from taking credit for what they did on this day a year ago. And that's because they've done a really great job of spinning the narrative and holding to the big lie. At no point did you hear any apologies, because it's not what they do. The thing Republicans do masterfully is they never apologize when they do something wrong. They double down on what they did wrong as if it was absolutely as right could be. And I look at Gaetz's comment. That is going to gain more steam in the coming weeks and months. That is going to be the mainstream Republican view going forward. While the president has stepped forward and said, we're going to get to the bottom of this. Merrick Garland yesterday said we're going to use the power of the Department of Justice to ensure that people are held accountable. Republicans are going to go the complete opposite direction. And they're going to go we did nothing wrong. It was a patriotic day that we're proud of. They're proud of the fact that a Confederate flag got inside our Capitol. They're proud of the fact that police officers were stabbed with American flags. They're proud of that because that is who they are. They are the party of, they don't care about democracy. They don't care about anything unless they win. And if they lose, I mean, this is the ultimate in sore loser. If they lose, then it's burn the house down. But that's not new. None of this is new. This is who they've always been. The difference is they've never had someone with the courage of a Matt Gaetz. And yep, I'm going there. Someone with the courage of Matt Gaetz to step forward and say, you know what? I don't care what anybody thinks. I don't care if it's treason. I don't care if it's sedition. I don't care if it's an insurrection. I'm doubling down. I did it. I did the right thing. This is what you're going to see going forward. And this is scary. Also, what we find out today, Stephanie Grisham, former White House press secretary, told CNN that Donald Trump was watching gleefully, saying, look at all those people fighting for me. He was gleeful. He wanted this to happen. And are you surprised by it? No, there's no surprise here. And anybody who was surprised, anybody who sits and goes, I can't believe that happened, clearly have not paying attention the last 30 years. And I love what Republicans have been doing here recently. Now turning the table, saying, well, this is all Democrats. Democrats are just blowing this out of proportion so they can use it. They can exploit it for political gain. And you go, really? This was a coup attempt. This is 232 years of peaceful transfers of power. This was a legacy that you cannot get back. This was the soul of what made this republic great. And they sought to destroy it. We got to hold them accountable. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can send me an email, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Like I said, I do answer all the decent ones, even a couple of crazies like George from Florida. Thanks, George. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1944. That was the day that progressive-era journalist Ida Tarbell died. Often referred to as a leading muckraker, she is considered to have pioneered investigative journalism. She is best known for her expose on the history of the Standard Oil Company, which was serialized in McClure's magazine starting in 1902. The 19-part series detailed John D. Rockefeller's rise to power, the oil empire he created, his business practices, secret alliances with railroads and refiners, and ruthless dealings. Tarbell had a personal stake in unveiling Rockefeller and Standard Oil. Her father was a small oil producer and refiner in Pennsylvania who was virtually ruined, as was much of the region, by Rockefeller's machinations in 1872. She noted Rockefeller and his associates did not build Standard Oil Company in the boardrooms of Wall Street banks and investment houses, water their stock and rig the market. They fought their way to control by rebate and drawback, bribe and blackmail, espionage and price cutting, by ruthless, never slothful efficiency of organization and production. Tarbell combed through hundreds of thousands of pages of documents and interviewed company executives and employees, competitors, regulators, and academics. In 1999, New York University ranked her history of Standard Oil 5th out of the top 100 investigative journalist pieces of the century. The expose eventually led to the breakup of the Standard Oil monopoly by the Supreme Court under the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1911. Though her views on unions were more complicated, her history of Rockefeller and Standard Oil revealed to the public, to labor unions, and to workers everywhere the levels tycoons will go to secure power and profits. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the news came out today. Evidently, on this day a year ago, remember the story that they found a pipe bomb at the DNC? Yeah, the people who were just out there for a picnic, the good God-fearing Christian patriots who were just there for redress of grievance, who were just there to show signs of support, the unarmed masses with the pipe bombs at the DNC. Evidently, we now find out that Vice President-elect at the time, current Vice President Kamala Harris, was actually in the building, which kind of gives you some questions of, how bad could this have gotten if they were a little more competent? Lots of questions here to share some thoughts on that. I've asked Ammar Moussa to come talk with us. Ammar is a rapid response director at the Democratic National Committee. Ammar, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
So this revelation that that Kamala Harris was in the building, this is kind of a big thing to hold on to for a year, don't you think?
Well, I wasn't at the DNC at the time. It started in March, but obviously, like you touched on, it was a really scary day, and for a lot of different reasons. And the fact that there were thousands of people who were trapezing through the Capitol and promising to hang Nancy Pelosi and smearing feces on the wall, it was a really, really terrifying day, and it's just a reminder of how close we were to so much danger. And to your point, if maybe they were a little bit more competent, it would have been worse. But all of this has been enabled by Donald Trump and today's Republican Party.
Yeah, but come on, Ammar. I mean, as George from Florida emailed me, they were just peaceful protesters there to merely protest a rigged election. They were allowed into the Capitol by police. They went through metal detectors. They stayed through the velvet ropes. It was a peaceful day. Come on, what are you talking about?
Peaceful day. I think one Republican congressman called it nothing more than a bunch of tourists coming through the Capitol. It is genuinely terrifying again, this happened because Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy and every single Republican leader enabled and encouraged it. Yep. And it speaks to how morally bankrupt the Republican Party is today.
And I'm glad you put it that way, because everyone focuses on Trump and everyone wants to give Trump credit for the Republican Party going completely off the rails. But this is who they've been for a very long time. This has been the party of fascism, and you can run away from that if you want to. But this has been the corporate party. This has been the party of the people instead of we the people for a very long time. This is just finally their coming out. And I point to Matt Gaetz' statement that they're proud of what they did. They're going to march it again. They're going to do this again. They're taking ownership of it as it was. Just another patriotic day.
I mean, again, Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene's press conference today, I think, to put it nicely, was unhinged. And for them to continue, this is who Kevin McCarthy protects in his caucus. He protects Marjorie Taylor Greene. Kevin McCarthy earlier this week was asking his members to defend Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think this is today's Republican Party, and full of extremists. And that's what's at stake in these elections in 2022. If every pundit in DC wants to talk about how Republicans have it in the bag, but I think Americans are pretty clear-eyed about what's on the other side of this. If Republicans take power, you're looking at Ted Cruz, who promised yesterday that if Republicans take power, they're going to impeach Joe Biden, justified or not. That is the quote.
Right.
The Republican Party is full of extremists, and they've let it fester for not just through Donald Trump presidency, but longer. And, you know, it's January 6th was just the beginning of what is truly, truly possible for this scary, scary party.
No, I said yesterday, you know, they say, oh, it was a failed coup attempt. And I asked the question, was it really a failed attempt? They failed to keep Donald Trump in office now, but I don't believe it's over. I think they're still building. The moneyed interests are still funding these underground groups, the Proud Boys and the 3%ers and the Oath Keepers and all these crazy right-wing fringe Christian white supremacist idiotic groups. They're still doing their thing underground. I'm hoping the FBI and everybody else are doing their jobs, but they're still organizing. They're just doing it not as public as they had been over the last 4 years.
Absolutely. And it's not, they're underground groups, but let's be honest about what the Republican Party elected officials are doing right now at the state level, where at state houses across the country, they are laying the groundwork to overturn an election, and that's why Democrats are fighting so hard to protect voting rights and to fight back on these Republican attempts. You know, not only are they looking at like extremists with, you know, big guns and assault weapons, but we're also talking about Republican members at state houses who are doing everything in their power to subvert the vote and to set the groundwork for, you know, overturning the will of the people.
Yeah. Now here's one of my knocks against the Democrats at this point. I said on January 6th, 2021, let the hearings begin now. I think we're way too far away from the event now. I know they're talking about hearings in April, May, maybe. Which again, I think way too far away. This is stuff that has to get out there. The messaging has to be these people committed crimes that are so egregious, so they strike so at the heart of our democracy that they can't wait, that we can't put this stuff off. It is that important. Because all I heard today on right-wing radio is, but the George Floyd protesters, they did damage. That's not the same. These people wanted to take down our democracy. They wanted to end 230 plus years of peaceful transfers of power, and they almost succeeded.
They did, but they did not, because let's remember about frankly, the heroes who took a beating to protect the Capitol, to protect the members of Congress, and to protect the staff. I have friends who were in the building that day. And so I think that Democrats are focused on highlighting these, to hold people accountable. I think we heard a very powerful speech from Merrick Garland yesterday, where it is a methodical process. I think what the Select Committee is doing today, and for the last few months, is amassing this evidence to create this airtight case for the people who are responsible and to hold them accountable.
Yeah. No, I agree with that, Ammar. I do. I understand. I understand the DOJ's got to do its job. Airtight cases, you want that for the courtroom. But the political part of this is we need perp walks. We need people who are going to be held accountable. There needs to, a guest the other day brought it up. And he said, look, no one's really been held accountable. On January 6th, 2021, those folks got to walk out of there and go home. And in that, they got to take that message and spin it to where they did nothing wrong. They were patriots. And now you got Matt freaking Gaetz going, hey, I'm proud of what we did. That's insane to me.
It is incredibly frustrating, but to see Matt Gaetz be able to pretend that like nothing happened, for Ron Johnson to sweep it under the rug. But I think I have all of the faith in the world in Joe Biden's Justice Department and in the Select Committee, right, to hold these people accountable, and to hold them accountable to make sure the American public knows what's going on. And I think it is a long process.
No, and to that vein, I look at today's speech by President Biden, which I think was probably the most powerful speech of his presidency thus far. I'm generally not a fan of him giving long speeches because, he's not Barack Obama. He's not Bill Clinton. He struggles a little bit. I thought today he was on point. I thought today he was powerful. I thought the words were powerful because it did send that message. Donald Trump lost. He said it 5 times. And we're going to get to the bottom of this, and we're going to save democracy, and we're not going to allow the people who would hold a dagger to the throat of democracy to win. And I thought that was powerful.
I fully agree with you. I think today's speech was probably one of, if not the best speech that President Biden has given to date. I think that it was powerful, and my favorite line is, Donald Trump isn't just a former president; he's a defeated former president. And like to your point about messaging and making this case to the American public, it is important to remember that today every single broadcast network, and including Fox News and OAN and Newsmax, carried Joe Biden's speech today. This was a message that was every person on the spectrum that was watching today saw this speech, this very, very powerful speech that was a blunt message.
Yep.
And a message of, we have to be better than this. And Donald Trump lost, and his lies are hurting our country.
No, and are you surprised? Let me ask you this first. Are you surprised that so few Republicans showed up today? I mean, you would think that this was a national day to remember the people who were who died on that day, the number of people who were harmed on that day. Are you surprised that only 2 Republicans showed up at the House, Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney? I mean,
I think it speaks to the moral bankruptcy of today's Republican Party. I mean, let's remember, Kevin McCarthy stood on the House floor a week after January 6th last year and bluntly said that Donald Trump was responsible, and then flew down to Mar-a-Lago 2 weeks later to kiss the ring. Everybody remembers Lindsey Graham's speech where he says, "Count me out," and then is playing golf with him less than 3 weeks later. This is today's Republican Party, blindly loyal to the guy who had cost them the House, cost them the Senate, cost them the White House, and cost our country dearly beyond, there is no way to put into words. And so, no, this is the Republican Party that is desperate to gaslight in America that January 6th didn't happen and we didn't enable it. But the Republican Party is responsible for it, and as, of course, Donald Trump.
I can't believe how soulless they are. I mean, I think of Ted Cruz. You'd have called my wife ugly, and we'd be rolling around on the ground. I would definitely not be kissing your ring. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Ammar Moussa. He is the Rapid Response Director over at the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, dnc.org, the website, if you want to check out the stuff that they've got there. But, Ammar, going forward, I've said for a while we need to get that Build Back Better plan done. That needed to be done last year. We need the voting stuff done. We need that done immediately because, we can be right. And this is the problem I have with Democrats. You're right. But we don't fight enough, and we don't ball up the digits. We don't get in there and throw the punches. We're in a moment right now where I think if we don't get this voting rights bill passed through, we don't get the John Lewis bill or even the freedom to vote bill pushed through, I think 22 is over, and I think 24 is gone as well, because the Republicans have already done the work, man. They're putting in the work to put the roadblocks up in every state. They're figuring out how to rig the next elections. The steel is already in, unless Democrats move on these voter bills. So how are you gonna get that pushed through?
Well, I'm an optimist by nature, but even beyond that, I think what we know is, I think voting rights and delivering on voting rights is a priority, if not the top priority, for the administration right now. And that's why you're going to see President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris fly down to Georgia, which is ground zero for the Republican war on voting rights, and you're going to hear them deliver a speech. And I think the president and vice president are all in on fighting Republican efforts and delivering on a voting rights package. And so it is a priority for the White House, and it's a priority for the DNC. And let me be very clear: the DNC is not waiting for Congress to pass legislation. The DNC is already aggressively on the ground in battleground states across the country. I think we're spending upwards of $30 million to register voters, to educate voters, to hire lawyers who are going to protect people's right to vote. That is the DNC is in this fight and has been in this fight earlier than ever before. So the White House and President Biden and Kamala Harris are going to go to the mat to fight for voting rights. But the DNC is not waiting for Congress. We are going to continue to protect people's right to vote, and we're going to get in the mud for this.
So if I'm hearing you right, I'm thinking of an article that Rand Paul had tweeted out a couple of days ago, that American Conservative article about what happened in Wisconsin. You're talking about stealing the next election then. You're going to get out there and register voters. You're going to talk about issues. You're going to encourage the people to vote. You're going to give them issues to vote for. So you're really talking about stealing, in Republican language, you're talking about stealing the next election.
I think Rand Paul's really struggled to convince people that he's been right, and so he's forgotten what it takes to win an election. But what it takes to win an election, and what Democrats have proven, is talking about the issues, talking about what matters to people, knocking on doors, registering people, and that is what we're going to be doing. So, Rand Paul needs to get his definition straight.
Well, I mean, ultimately, we need to get people access to the ballot box, because, in all seriousness, and we've kind of joked around a little bit on this day. The reality is if there's a roadblock in front of our ballot box, and I don't care who it's for, I don't care who you vote for, who you support, any obstruction to our ability to cast a ballot, to participate in this wonderful experiment of self-governance, is a destruction of the legacy of this country and cannot be tolerated.
Absolutely. Like I said, the DNC is not resting on its laurels. We're in this fight. We're going to protect people's right to vote, regardless of where you are on the spectrum. That is also really important. Whether you vote for Republicans or Democrats or an independent, whatever, the DNC is fighting for people's right to vote. And we're going to do that in 2022. We're going to do that in 2023, and we're going to do it in 2024. We're going to continue to do that. And it is so personal to Chairman Jamie Harrison, and this is not the time to not the time to rest.
No, and that's the thing. Out of today, what is the message going forward coming out of the DNC? I mean, obviously today was about remembering the people who lost their lives, the people who were harmed on this day, and remembering what almost happened, and being grateful that our institution held. That a handful of Republicans in states didn't pull off the crimes that the administration had asked for. That we had a Dan Quayle to convince Mike Pence not to do what he was being asked to do. What's the message coming out of this then?
I think tomorrow we're going to, tomorrow and every day after, we're going to be reminding voters not only how Democrats are delivering, how we're going to deliver tax cuts for the middle class, how we're going to put money in the pockets of middle class families. We're going to also remind people what is on the other side and what Republicans stand for. Yep. And that is extremism and this loyalty to Donald Trump and this blind fealty to big corporations and the wealthy and lining their pockets, right? And we talk about, one of the biggest policy debates that are happening right now are Republicans going to the mat to protect their trillions of dollars of giveaways.
There you go. That is the message going forward. Ammar, I appreciate the time as always. Good stuff. Hope you'll come back real soon.
For sure. Thanks for having me on.
Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That was the day that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave a speech that would become one of the defining moments of his presidency. The world was embroiled in the Second World War. Debates raged about whether the United States should enter the conflict. At this critical time, Roosevelt delivered his State of the Union address. It became known as the Four Freedoms Speech. In it, President Roosevelt proposed 4 fundamental freedoms that should be shared by everyone in the world. They included the freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and the freedom from fear. Freedom of speech and freedom of worship had long been enshrined in the United States Constitution. But by declaring that people deserved freedom from want and fear, Roosevelt was charting new ground. It was this belief that undergirded his New Deal policies aimed at helping those devastated by the Great Depression. In his speech, Roosevelt declared that there were basic expectations by the people of the United States. They included jobs for those who can work, security for those who need it, the ending of special privilege for the few, the preservation of civil liberties for all, the enjoyment of the fruits of scientific progress in a wider and constantly rising standard of living. He then called for an increase in pensions, unemployment insurance, and access to medical care and jobs. In 1943, after the United States had entered the war, the Saturday Evening Post published a series of paintings by Norman Rockwell portraying each of the 4 freedoms outlined in the speech. The paintings by the popular artist helped to spread the idea of the freedoms to the American public. It's worth asking how far we've come in realizing these 4 freedoms today. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I'll tell you, I'm still stuck on this Matt Gaetz comment. Just mind-blowing. But again, this is where the current Republican Party is. This is definitely not the party of Lincoln. This isn't the party of Eisenhower. It's not the party of Reagan even. Not even George W. Bush. This is an extreme party. When you got Matt Gaetz, who says of a year ago today, we're ashamed of nothing. We're proud of the work we did on January 6th, and we're actually going to walk the grounds that patriotic Americans walked from the White House to the Capitol. Proud of it. They're proud of what happened. That is stunning. And here to share some thoughts on, well, is this the Republican Party today? I've asked Reed Galen to come talk with us. Reed is co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Reed, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me back.
So I'm looking at this comment, and I've been thinking about this most of the day, because this was, in my view, if you'd asked me a year ago what my thoughts of the future is, this was going to be it. They were eventually going to take ownership of it, because this is what Republicans do very well. They never apologize, they never back up, and they always, if they were wrong, they were double right wrong.
No, listen, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that. Listen, even when I was a Republican, any sort of apology was, with the exception of something truly egregious, you didn't apologize. You just drove on, right? Now what I think you see is that they relish this stuff, right? They relish the transgressive behavior and language. And I think also, Rick, they tell you what they're going to do. Like Green and Gaetz, they believe in this stuff. A lot of Republican candidates believe in this stuff. Is this the Republican Party of today? It is. When 68% of self-identified Republican voters believe that Donald Trump had the election stolen from him and therefore Joe Biden is an illegitimate president, that is the position of the Republican Party.
So you said a second ago, it's one of the reasons you left the party. You were a former Republican and a right. Republican operative, really high up there. How did the party get away from you? How did you guys get to this point? I mean, I have my views, but I'm curious from your perspective. How did you get here?
It's a good question, and I don't know that it only has one answer. I think there was a confluence of things. One is that I think the two parties started moving apart ideologically and geographically, frankly. And demographically. The Republican voters became increasingly white with this weird spread between the working class and the ultra wealthy. And the Democratic Party moved out to the coasts, became far more diverse. The difference, of course, is that the Republican Party had always had a pretty nasty racial tinge to it. That burst out into the open. If you think back to Mitt Romney being the Republican nominee in 2012, that was the end of it. And I think also you think back even to 2012, 2010, the Tea Party. We saw what was coming, but none of us, we all thought, oh, these are the people who we've always said, you know what, like, we hear you, we know you're here, you're sort of noisy, but you got no place else to go. right? We didn't understand that they would capture the party.
Yeah, the Buchanan wing, if you will. Because I remember back in the, Molly Ivins,
Sure.
She's passed.
I was there at that speech. I was on the floor of the Astrodome for that speech.
Oh, okay. Yeah. This is who
Sounded
they
better
are.
in the original German.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the thing, is that both political parties have always had their noisy activist wing. That was just what it was.
Right.
But the noisy activists tended to get just enough to keep them happy. And they stayed in line. I think we've already seen with the Republican Party that the activists, the inmates eventually overtook the asylum. And I think you see now amongst the Democrats that the progressive wing is unwilling to sit quietly for the things they believe in. I don't think it'll turn out the way it did for the Republican Party, admittedly. But I think that it just, we took a lot of things for granted. I think that it became, the party of big business and, tax cuts, tried to pawn people off with, judges and those sorts of things. And ultimately, the party was hollowed out ideologically because it became about power and money and nothing else.
Is there any way back?
Ironically enough, it's still just power and money.
Yeah, is there any way back to, do you see them coming between the curbs at some point or is, all of the punditry saying, oh, we're headed for violence in the streets, there's going to be a civil war, there's all of that talk of chaos. Do you think that's where we're headed?
I don't know yet. How does it come back? The Republican Party will have to be burnt down and reformed. As it currently stands, it is an anti-democratic authoritarian movement led by very, very bad people who have very, very bad intentions, which, as I noted earlier, they absolutely share with every one of us. They have to lose electorally badly in 2022, 2024, and probably 26 and 28 until finally somebody's going to say, I'd rather win than have Democrats take over everything.
But isn't that where they are now? I mean, you talk to the average Republican voter, and I know a lot of them because I'm in a very Republican area.
Sure.
They may not like what Trump has done. They may be a little uncomfortable with the riot, with the insurrection. They may not want policemen killed, and they may not want to see that kind of stuff. But they're still going to vote for the Republican because, well, the Democrats are evil incarnate, and that's been a great a great line for right-wing media who, honestly and truthfully, they dominate talk radio, they dominate cable news. They're the message machine that has created this monster.
Listen, I completely agree with you. The right-wing radical rage machine, for lack of a better way to put it, drives the political narrative in this country today. You can say that, there's CNN and there's MSNBC and the New York Times, but the truth is that whatever Tucker Carlson wants to talk about is probably going to get picked up by major, what we used to think of as mainstream media outlets. They'll cover it straight. There's this weird and really unfortunate, dual equivalency that somehow just because, you quoted a Democrat, you must quote a Republican, even if the Republican's just going to lie to your face or make something up. It's a dangerous thing. And what you said earlier with someone like Gates, they can say anything and they can lie about everything because they don't care, right? All they care about is winning. All they care about is ensuring that their people are as fired up as they can. Do I think that violence is upon us? I think we will see violence. I don't think we're going to know where or when. There is a whole bunch of kindling in the form of 20 or 30 million Americans who believe that, they truly believe in the sort of worst Trumpist Steve Bannon stuff. And, all they need is a spark. Yeah. But I'm hoping we get through this year, and I'm hoping we get through every year without that.
Yeah, because I look at some of the, I think of the Richmond, back when Trump was president, there was that rally at the Richmond. They called it a rally for the Second Amendment, but you saw all those people showing up with their guns, and to me, it seemed like a military operation and more of a scare tactic, saying, "Look what we can muster up. You literally cannot stop us." And then, of course, what we saw on January 6th. For me, I said that thing in Richmond was just the precursor to what could have happened on January 6th.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think we should also understand, too, that, Trump didn't just overtake the Republican Party and make it his own. He also created an umbrella movement of very unsavory characters, militia types, those sorts of folks who never had a place anywhere in mainstream politics and thankfully for it, or even really mainstream society. He gave those people a home within his orbit, within the Republican Party. And now they stand on street corners with AR-15s. Some of them utilize those AR-15s, as we saw in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And they absolutely do it on purpose. They absolutely do it to menace people, to say, yes, we will employ violence if necessary. We saw that one of those Turning Point USA things that Charlie Kirk guy put on. Well, a guy asked a question: when are we gonna stop putting up with this? And when are we gonna start killing people?
Yeah, and that's not just there. That's come out a number of times. When we getting the guns? And look, I know people like that. I know people who they've got guns and rice buried all over central Pennsylvania. They've told me, because they're ready for the next Civil War, because they think that they're going to, I don't know, change the outcome of the original one, which is twisted. But there are people who, they seem to want this kind of chaos, and I got to understand why. Is it because their lives didn't turn out as they were told they could have been? They were going to be, chieftains of industry and captains or this or that, and they turned out to be the guy who goes, "You want fries with that?" I don't know, but that kind of anger seems steeped in something, and I'm trying to put my hands on exactly what it is.
I mean, I think part of it, is this idea of, especially in the middle of the country, right, amongst the guys you're talking about. I think that they probably feel culturally put down. I think they probably feel like that the elitists on the coasts make fun of them, which they probably do, to be honest with you. And there's a resentment to that. Does that mean that they somehow didn't get the life they wanted? No, but I think that, and again, you probably know these guys better than I do. I think they have been made to feel, or have been allowed to feel, like, because of where they're from or what it is they do, that there's not enough inherent value in who they are as a person, which of course lets someone like a Donald Trump really fire those people up. It's this loss of, like, I was in charge and now I'm not, a way of life. They're coming, right? This is all very normal language for ideologues who are trying to pit one group over another. We saw that in Yugoslavia 30 years ago, where the Serbs are saying, look at all these people coming in, they're changing our way of life, it's our country, how come they come in, they, and what happens is, and I think, Rick, on the violence front, it's very dangerous, because what happens is an individual becomes not a subject, an individual, but they become an object. Them, they, it, they're the enemy. And I think that's where it gets pretty dangerous.
No, and that is the fear, and you're absolutely right on that. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Reed Galen. Reed's the co-founder of the Lincoln Project. You can follow them on Twitter at Project Lincoln. I look at this moment, and I really am trying to reach some of my Republican friends, because I think in order to do what you've said has to happen, the Republican Party has to find themselves, and maybe that's a couple elections down the line. It's still the voters. It's still the people who are still pulling those levers. And if they're being constantly bombarded with the kind of other talk, they're the problem that we see on Fox News, that we see in talk radio. All I heard today on talk radio was Antifa, the George Floyd protests. That's where they focus their attention. And as long as the red meat, the outrage candy, what I call it, is being fed to these people, I don't know that this taps down.
No, I think you're right. Again, and all of that is deflection and projection, right? It wasn't us, it was them. Let's not talk about an insurrection at the Capitol. Let's talk about, and when they say, the BLM protest, what they're saying is black people burning buildings down in cities, right? That's what, they're not even using coded language anymore, right? There's this sort of thing. It's like, oh, they keep saying the quiet part out loud. No, they're saying it all out loud. There's no quiet part anymore. Yeah. They're willing to say anything. And look, Rick, there's been no sanction for them. Legally, politically, socially, none of it, right? Financially, no one other than the 700 or 800 people who stormed the Capitol have been held to account in any way for this. And, unless somebody gets off the schneid in a hurry, a lot of people probably won't ever deal with, suffer for it. It's all well and good to have a congressional committee saying, here's this thing that you did, but as last time I checked, it's the executive branch that prosecutes people federally. It's not Congress. And so, I hope that, Attorney General Garland means it when they're going to take something seriously. I hope that, President Biden give a very forceful, I thought, necessary speech at the Capitol today. I hope he means it. But there's got to be consequences. There's that famous trope, right? A coup unpunished is practice, and we can't let them practice again.
No, you're absolutely right. And so let me get your thoughts on today's speech. I thought it was probably the best speech of his presidency. I'm generally not somebody, if I were one of his handlers, not putting him out for a 25-minute speech. But I thought he did really well today, and I thought the words were powerful, and I thought he delivered it well.
I think so, and I think he needed. It was the speech he needed to give, and I think it was the speech he needed to give not only for the country writ large, but frankly for his party, because as you know, Democrats want to win. They want to feel good about how they win. They want to be thought of as the good guys and the white hats. But as you know, Rick, in a fight, if you stand there with your hands by your side while the other guy punches you in the stomach and the face, you're going to lose most of the time.
Yeah, well, my comment on Democrats has always been when a fight breaks out, they'll be the ones to hold your coat. And I'm hoping this, to your point, I'm hoping this was that moment where they throw your coat on the ground and they join in. Right.
Well, listen, we don't hold many people's coats, and I don't believe that you do either. But I'll say this: is I think that the pulse you have on those folks in places like central Pennsylvania, I think is hugely important. I think there are votes for Democratic candidates in those areas. I really do.
And this is where we'll probably disagree on things. I think the issues are as important as the rhetoric. As a union guy, as a working class guy, I think Democrats have to find their roots in those worlds and promote good, sound labor law reform, make people's lives better, be the party of the working class, the FDR era. And we may disagree on that, but I think that's where they
listen,
go.
I'll say this. I spent 10 years in California, so every union you can think of kicked the you-know-what out of me one time or another, right? But I would say you're absolutely right. When it comes to the building trades, when it comes to the Teamsters, when it comes to the private sector unions, I 100% agree. I think you see, I was talking to somebody about this today, the idea that you've got a guy like Jeff Bezos who only worries about like going on rich people's yachts and shooting rockets into space when he's got a facility collapse in the midst of a tornado and he can't even be troubled to say something about it. I think we've clearly crossed some sort of Rubicon when it comes to how we deal with, employees who are working their tails off, who aren't able to go to the bathroom. Like this is not the early 1900s, right? Like with a Triangle Shirt Company, like is that what it's going to take? We're going to have to lose 700 people in some awful fire before we sort of wake up and say we can't treat human beings like that. And so I think that you're absolutely right. And I think that Democrats shouldn't be timid about stuff like that, because I think that the white working class has moved away, culturally part of it, but also because they saw unions disappearing and not a lot of people fighting for them.
Yeah. And look, I've said this, as the Democrats were Republican light. That's when things started to split into parts. And I think they need to get that back. And look, I would love if there were pro-union Republicans again. I'm old enough to remember where there were some. I would like to see that back again and some soul back to the party. But Reed, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Appreciate your thoughts as always. Good stuff.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Reed Galen, co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Make sure you check out the work that they do on Twitter at Project Lincoln. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year 1878, celebrated as the birthday of renowned Illinois poet Carl Sandburg, the youngest of 3 children born to Clara and August Sandburg, Swedish immigrants in Galesburg, Illinois. Carl Sandburg worked as an editorial writer at the Chicago Daily News. He was part of a group of poets and novelists known as the Chicago Literary Renaissance. Sandburg became most well known for his poetry, for which he won 2 Pulitzer Prizes. He also won a 3rd Pulitzer Prize for his biography of his hero, Abraham Lincoln. Sandberg's poems often evoked images and explored themes of the industrialized United States. This was especially true of his 1920 volume, Smoke and Steel. In this collection, Sandberg wrote about workers in Gary, Indiana, and farmers around Omaha, Nebraska. He wrote about railroad workers and steel workers. His words instilled unexpected beauty in these industrial scenes. Sandberg wrote in free verse, a style that did not rhyme. He used accessible language in his poems, making them available to the common man. He would take short tours around the United States, reading his poems and playing folk songs on his guitar. His poems gained a wide popular readership. The opening lines of his poem Chicago so captured the workers and the spirit of the city that these words remain indelibly entwined in the city's image to this day. Hog butcher for the world, tool maker, stacker of wheat, player with railroads and the nation's freight handler. Stormy, husky, brawling, city of big shoulders. To commemorate the 100th anniversary of his birth, the United States Postal Service issued a stamp in his honor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today, all about the January 6th. And like I said, in talking with Reed Galen, the reality is, these Republicans, they're not ashamed. They're owning it now. Matt Gaetz, proud of what they did. Gonna do it again. Gonna walk the walk. That should be very frightening to every American, that the people who I'm hoping will end up behind bars are coming out and changing the narrative. Lots of stuff to get to on this, and here to share some thoughts on, all of the other stories surrounding today's events. I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. Sarah's a reporter over at RawStory, rawstory.com, the website. She has done tons of reporting on this. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, happy Thursday, happy New Year, all of the things.
All of those things. So let's start with Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz is in no way, shape, or form. No way. He's afraid of it. He's proud of what happened on January 6th. Proud of it. Gonna do it again.
Which is interesting because he also blames the federal government for what happened. So I'm like, okay, well, if you're proud of it, but you blame the federal government, are you saying that this was a false flag or a deep state inside job and you support it? I mean, it just seems like he sort of got too caught up in his own BS.
Yeah.
But
I did have a guy from Florida tell me that it was a false flag. He said it was a patriotic day. Everybody went through metal detectors, so they were all unarmed. He has a very different view of what happened, what I saw happen on TV that day than I think the majority of us. So the question then becomes, Republicans are doubling down on this. Which way do you see the country going? Is it going to be, it was a patriotic day when the history is written? Will it be remembered as, a great march, or will this be remembered for the insurrection that it was?
I think it's going to be remembered for the insurrection that it was, regardless of what people think now. In the future, what we're going to have is all of the videos and the photos and all of the, FBI paperwork and everything that will be public. And the people who are making excuses and making up all kinds of reasons that it was, all conspiracy theories, they're going to be gone. Those people are going to be out of here. So, I think, honestly, the guys who are trying to change the narrative on this are the ones that are just infuriating, because for some people, it really is working. People who were disgusted by it, I think it's changed like 17% or something like that over the course of the last year. People who, consider it a bad thing now, say, well, maybe it's not that bad, maybe it's justified. So that is something that's really disgusting. I think that will change over time, especially hopefully after we see the hearings publicly.
Right. That was the thought. Do you think as the hearings come out and if they ever do, because I'm waiting, this should have, in my view, started months ago. Do you think that the narrative will then switch back, or do you think, as I do, and this is where I disagree with people who think that it's going to change, that most people are already dug in. They've got their opinions made up. They're in their camp. You're not going to reach them. It's too late. The time to reach them was 10 months ago. But I'm curious your thoughts.
I think so. There absolutely is a subsection of people who you will never be able to move. But that group of people that initially believed that it was a really terrible thing and then have been persuaded, I think you get them back. I mean, I think there is always a big chunk of Trump supporters within the Republican Party that are never going to change, and we can't reach them. And I don't know why we even try. But there are several people who I think we can reach and we will reach with that kind of footage on from the hearings.
So today, Ashley Babbitt's name came up again. Hero, martyr. I heard those words knocked around. In fact, you wrote a story on one of the Fox News hosts complaining that Speaker Pelosi didn't mention her name in the people killed. I'm sorry. I don't see her as a martyr. I don't see her as a hero. I see her as someone who, sorry, you shouldn't have been doing what you did. And this is generally what my right-wing friends say of whenever anyone else is shot, stop criming, kind of a thought.
Yeah, that's the thing is every single one of the chances that she could have gotten, she had. She didn't have to break into the Capitol. She didn't have to help people break down that door and break through all the glass. When the officer was aiming his gun and all of the people around her were shouting, "Gun, gun, he has a gun," she didn't have to walk through that window. And as a result of all of her decisions, she was shot and killed. So if she's not there that day, she doesn't die. I'm just saying.
Yeah, there is that. And I take no joy in someone losing their life, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to the martyr or hero range.
Yeah, not even close. That's just unacceptable. And I think, belittles the people who were terrorized on that day and who did die as a result of their injuries, both psychological and physical.
Now, it's interesting. There were a couple of stories coming out of one of the parents of a police officer coming to meet him at the end of his shift. I mean, there are some of those heartwarming stories, those things that touch you. Out of tragedy, some of those things pop up, and I think those are good stories too.
I think so too. Those are beautiful stories. The stories about what people did for each other in the Capitol. Some of the members who maybe weren't necessarily good friends, who just sort of knew each other because they were in the caucus, but the way that they helped each other. Representative Crow from Colorado holding one of the women's hands because she was hyperventilating and completely freaking out. Jayapal had just had knee surgery a couple of weeks ago. She talked about how she was really scared that, because she was limping along as they were trying to escape, that that they would come from behind and grab her. And so a couple of the members said, well, then they're just going to have to grab all of us. And they stayed back with her and walked with her, as slowly as she was going. There are things like that where, I think that is the good in America. That is the good in the world. People looking at a really scary, terrifying situation and saying, we have each other's backs. And what's disgusting is that all of those Republicans that we've seen on camera laughing, joking, when Democrats offered them a mask to be, whenever they were in a closed room, they laughed and mocked Democrats for doing that. And, there are good things that happen amid the tragedy. And it's what is the saying, always look for the helpers.
Yeah.
That's Mr. Rogers saying.
I have always wondered what would have happened had the crowd actually grabbed one of the Republican Congress people. Would they have known? And what would have happened to those people? Would they have known who some congressman from South Carolina is? Would it have mattered had they gotten their hands on one of those people? Would we have seen someone swinging from the gallows?
I wonder too. There was one of the Republicans who said to Adam Schiff, at one point, you go ahead. I know these people. They're my people. I can deal with them. And but I think you're right. If they don't know who the person is, if it's not somebody famous like Jim Jordan or Matt Gaetz or Marjorie Taylor Greene, they may not know the difference between a Republican or a Democrat. And maybe, they were just ready to grab somebody and hang them.
Yeah, no, I did find it interesting that Marjorie Taylor Greene was giving a rant. I think it was on like OAN or Newsmax or something, one of those right-wing channels. And she got so crazy that they cut her. And this is the weird kind of moment. And again, I go back to my belief that Democrats made a huge mistake by kicking her off of her committees, because I want that kind of crazy in those committees. I want, and I've said this a million times, you probably heard me say it, I want her on the education committee so one of the other members can go, we need more money for education. Exhibit A.
I know it's really hard because that's a tough balance. You don't want to, promote this person so that she becomes more famous, but at the same time, if you give her a microphone, it is really funny, and she always, ends up screwing herself over. I do think that networks like OAN and Newsmax and those guys are probably a little bit fearful because she could start going super crazy and could get them, hooked into a lawsuit. Like that's already what's happened to them with the voting rights stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if those networks are just being a little bit more careful than they were before.
Yeah, I just found that so interesting. She's being censored by her own crowd because she is literally that far off the beaten path. But the sad reality is she seems to be the heart and soul of today's Republican Party. Her and then the coiffed-haired guy and the gun nut from out west, that seems to be the heart and soul of that party right now.
The thing that's difficult for me is I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is clever enough to be manifesting this and trying to manipulate people. Lauren Boebert is the biggest idiot I've ever seen in my life, probably the biggest idiot in Congress. But I really do think that Greene knows what she's doing, and I think that she's doing it for money, just like Donald Trump decided that he was going to do whenever he started running for president in 2016. Yeah. And now what he's doing with his super PAC. I think this is really her manipulating people.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter over at RawStory, rawstory.com, the website if you want to check out her work. Now, you saw, and you've written a couple of stories on this Stephanie Grisham, who was Trump's press secretary for a bit, and I guess former chief of staff to the First Lady. She came out and basically said on CNN that, on this day a year ago, Trump was gleeful. He was happily watching the insurrection, saying, "Look at my people fighting for me." There was no savior of democracy on the watch that day, and I'm reading this stuff and I'm going, what is it that's gotten her? What's gotten her to come out and go, no, this is what happened? And thank goodness she has.
That's been really interesting to watch her evolution over the last several years, because she really started out early on in the First Lady's office, I think doing communications, and then ultimately moved over to doing communications and then eventually press secretary with the West Wing office, and then moved back over to the East Wing to be a chief of staff. So she, of all people that had been in the White House with Trump, she had been there quite a long time, which is saying something for the Donald Trump White House. So the fact that she turned and wrote about it so publicly and basically just told everything. And she's part of an organizing effort with a bunch of former Donald Trump staffers who are going to come out next week and basically say that they're dedicating all of their time and efforts to fighting back against him and his crazy rhetoric. Yeah. Which I think is really, it's one thing to publish a book and get a bunch of money out of it, but, standing up and saying, I'm going to do whatever it takes to fight against your message, that's something. That's them actually, I think, stepping up and doing something tangible that the country really needs right now.
No, absolutely. And you need those people. During Trump's time, you had someone anonymously writing during that. And I wonder if she was part of whatever that was then. Yeah. In trying to get some of this out. And look, the number of leaks that you saw coming out of that administration, tells me that at least those people were cognizant of what he was doing was wrong. Mm-hmm. That administration was like a sieve. I'm looking at this administration. You're not seeing as many leaks, You're not seeing mostly out of Kamala Harris's office, but you're not seeing anything come out of the White House, and you're not seeing anything come out of the DOJ. I mean, Trump's DOJ was a sieve, which means to me that the people, the career people at the DOJ, believe they're heading in the right direction and doing the right job, as opposed to the 4 years that Trump was there, where they all believed they were on the wrong track.
Exactly. And one of the major things that we saw coming out of Trump's office is that there were a ton of people who said after the fact that they were trying to stay there because they thought that they were going to be the only barrier between, Trump and a nuclear weapon, or Trump and making the worst decisions that would bring down our country. And I don't know if that's who Stephanie Grisham is. I know that there are a couple of people that we have heard from. Miles Taylor, obviously, was the anonymous guy. Olivia Troy has talked about her experience. John Kelly, those guys. What was interesting, my favorite stories that I heard were the times that Kellyanne Conway was leaking a bunch of information via text message, but all of the text chats were on her computer so that anybody walking by her computer could see what she was texting from her phone from another room. So she just clearly was a really, really bad leaker, I guess. But, some of them, I really do think that those folks were the ones standing between Donald Trump and the absolute worst that could happen to us. So thank you.
My mind keeps going to that place. And now I see what Melania Trump's doing, what NFTs and selling hats and, what's going on there?
That is the weirdest thing ever. And the thing that I find the most interesting about it is that she says that she's donating just a portion of it to her Be Best campaign, which I don't even know what they did when she was in the White House, much less what they're doing now. I don't believe for a second she's really, maybe it's like $5 or something, but she's selling her big white hat that she wore during the state visit from Emmanuel Macron, and bidding, and she's signing the inside of it, and bidding starts at $250,000. So I'm curious to see if the reserve is going to be met on that, because I can't imagine, what is the point of that? You're not getting anything that interesting.
She's not Jackie Onassis.
Big white hat. I feel like somebody could make that hat as a knockoff and do it for $20 in felt, right? How hard could that be?
Put some scribble in there.
Yeah, how hard could that be, right?
She's not Jackie Onassis. That ain't happening.
No, not by a long shot.
But I'm looking at all this stuff and I'm going, lots of chaos. And again, it's all about the money. It seems to be always back to the graft.
The grift never ends, and that's, I guess maybe she's trying to figure out how to profit as well. I don't really get the whole NFT thing. I don't understand where she came to that idea. I don't know if somebody just came to her and said, oh, here's an idea, and this is sort of a, rare niche of people that might be into you or something. But I'm curious if they're going to end up having their own cryptocurrency that's Cheeto coin or old orange man coin, or I don't know. There are a lot of crazy options.
We got to start Cheeto coin. We've got to do that. That is our mission going forward. If anybody knows how to start one of these, I got to now know. We have to start Cheeto coin. I got to find out if Cheeto is trademarked. But
on that. I'm just saying, yeah. But I bet, honestly, if you turned Cheetos into currency, that could really be a legitimate thing, because they're pretty great, right?
Yeah. No, that is fabulous. Cheeto coin. That we got to do that. That's our millions. It's all, to me, it's a Ponzi scheme from the start, but this is where it goes. Wow. That's where we're ending, on Cheeto coin. Sarah, I appreciate the time. Great stuff.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You as well. Our good friend, Sarah Burris. RawStory.com, the website. Make sure you check out the work that she does there. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1944. That was the day that progressive-era journalist Ida Tarbell died. Often referred to as a leading muckraker, she is considered to have pioneered investigative journalism. She is best known for her expose on the history of the Standard Oil Company, which was serialized in McClure's magazine starting in 1902. The 19-part series detailed John D. Rockefeller's rise to power, the oil empire he created, his business practices, secret alliances with railroads and refiners, and ruthless dealings. Tarbell had a personal stake in unveiling Rockefeller and Standard Oil. Her father was a small oil producer and refiner in Pennsylvania who was virtually ruined, as was much of the region, by Rockefeller's machinations in 1872. She noted Rockefeller and his associates did not build Standard Oil Company in the boardrooms of Wall Street banks and investment houses, water their stock and rig the market. They fought their way to control by rebate and drawback, bribe and blackmail, espionage and price cutting, by ruthless, never slothful efficiency of organization and production. Tarbell combed through hundreds of thousands of pages of documents and interviewed company executives and employees, competitors, regulators, and academics. In 1999, New York University ranked her history of Standard Oil 5th out of the top 100 investigative journalist pieces of the century. The expose eventually led to the breakup of the Standard Oil monopoly by the Supreme Court under the Sherman Antitrust Act in 1911. Though her views on unions were more complicated, her history of Rockefeller and Standard Oil revealed to the public, to labor unions, and to workers everywhere the levels tycoons will go to secure power and profits. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You got a question, comment, thought, something on your mind. Cheeto coin. That's my billion right there. There's our billion. All we got to do is come up with CheetoCoin.com. And I wonder if the makers of Cheeto would sue us, though. But hey, I'm sure someone would buy it. We're in that kind of crazy spot. Here's an interesting story. Evidently, according to the Daily Beast and the National Labor Relations Board, the New York Times did in fact illegally attempt to bust the union campaign there of the workers at the New York Times. According to the National Labor Relations Board, they wrote that the Times has been interfering with, restraining, and coercing employees in the exercise of the rights guaranteed by the National Labor Relations Act. Now, here's the weird thing. You go, what's the penalty? Are they going to have to post a note? Oh, sorry, promise not to do it. Now, the Times is saying we disagree. The union allegations are, skewed. This is where either you have the right to do the things, and what this is over is they were using pro-union avatars on Slack and on Google Meet and things like that. And management, basically lost their mind. And there was a bunch of other stuff that went into this. I look at this as another one of those moments where our labor laws are so badly broken and employers have been so used to breaking the law and getting away with it that now they're flipping out. And you go, the New York Times, isn't the New York Times that liberal bastion? I don't believe they are, but this happens. Liberal groups, fight just as much as conservative groups because they like power. Management always likes power over working people. And this is where I always come back to every CEO in this country has a contract. Every worker should too. For me, it is that simple. But the problem is when you've only got 6% of the labor force in the private sector in unions, you only have 6% of the people who know what a contract actually does and how it helps. Overall, the country is at about 10% because in the public sector, union density is about 33%. That's even after Janus. So when you look at that, when only 10%, 1 out of every 10 workers is affiliated with a union, there's a problem. And the message then comes from the right wing. Well, 90% of the people don't want it. And that's not even remotely close to the truth. I know lots of people who want to be in a union. It's just as they view and as they've heard and as the messaging's gone, it's too difficult. The risk for them is too great because look, they got bills to pay. They got kids to feed. They got mortgages to pay. They need the job. which is why I go back to when my grandparents were working in the mass of their lives. And, it was much easier. And you had considerable community support. And you had a very active labor movement. That's a big part of this. And I look at the piece written by Stephen Greenhouse, which I like Stephen Greenhouse. He was a New York Times labor reporter for a bunch of years. He's asking the question, when's the labor movement going to turn around and take advantage of this moment when worker anger is at an all-time high? We've been through a pandemic where people were labeled as patriotic and essential, and here they are, working 70 hours a week with very little increase in their wages, and you got all this anger, and you've got millions of people quitting jobs. It seems right now would be the perfect opportunity to begin organizing workers, to begin getting people to join and form. And he asked the question, why is it taking so long? Well, he said, quote, the worker advocates that he speaks to keep wondering, what are labor leaders waiting for? If not now, then when? And I look at this and I go, yeah, when? I know it's tough. I know it's hard to deal with. But at the end of it, you building a movement of people who are thirsting for the opportunity to join a union, to get that contract, to make lives better. I'm not sure. Now, he points out a couple of organizations that grew, from the ground up. He looked at 350.org, who started in 2008, by, Bill McGibbon and a couple of college students. 2 years later, they've got a huge, climate action, day of action. They've got, thousands of events around the globe. You think of after the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman High School in Florida, within a couple of weeks, the March for Our Lives group grew up. The Black Lives Matter, you've seen massive movements built out of the anger of the day. And they're saying, look, it's time for labor to do the same thing. It seems like now is the time. Let's go to line. Let's see who's on line one. Andrew from Texas. What's on your mind, Andrew?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you today?
I saw you were talking. Oh, I'm good, thanks. How are you? I was listening in earlier. I didn't get to call in earlier. We were talking about stuff about like the election fraud and stuff. And I have to say, I agree with you a lot. I mean, I'm from a very conservative area, and combined with, I'm a younger guy. People around my age, it's kind of scary how many believe that kind of stuff. And because I'm in like a conservative area, I actually end up arguing with a lot of people about that. And to me, I find it kind of crazy, like how the election was so long ago, but they just keep talking about it. They won't shut up about it.
Well, they need it. They need to keep feeding the outrage candy to keep people upset, because their lives are getting better, things are getting better, but you got to keep them. You got to keep the outrage. You got to keep the red meat. And this is the thing the right wing has done masterfully over the last couple of decades. They never run out of red meat to feed.
Yeah, it's like, it makes me wonder, like, are they going to keep talking about this until the next conservative gets elected? Are we going to have to hear this for the next, like 6 years potentially?
Yes.
Well, hopefully.
Yes, that's the plan.
Elected.
But if you remember 2015, Trump was already setting this. This was part of the plan in 2015 because he expected to lose to Hillary Clinton in 2016, and they were already laying the groundwork for the election was stolen. So anybody who was paying attention shouldn't be surprised that this kind of grievance, this whining, this poor sportsmanship, this loser mentality of kicking and screaming like a 2-year-old in a cereal aisle is where they are. At least I'm not surprised by it.
Yeah, it's like, after all this time, they really have to like make stuff up. They have to like pretend all of this stuff because it's the only way they can make themselves feel better. Like what it really reminds me of, it really reminds me of like you with your weight. Like you have to pretend you're not.
I appreciate the call, Andrew. That was really nice of you to give us a call. in looking at this, and Andrew's right. I mean, they have to keep making this stuff up. They have to keep, feeding the outrage candy. They have to keep, their folks all riled up, and they do it well. You got to give them credit. Appreciate the call, Andrew. Make sure you call back again. Again, I look at this, and it's one of these things that are, kind of amusing on a certain level, but scary. I know people who I think are somewhat intelligent. I think they're somewhat, tuned in, but they continue digesting this outrage candy. They keep going in that direction. They keep allowing themselves to be upset. And as Andrew pointed out, the big lie seems to be out there constantly. And are we going to have to, for the next 2, 4, and 6 years, are we going to have to continue to hear about this? There are a lot of people who go, oh, well, 2000, the Democrats had an election stolen from them. And you could make the argument that they did. Catherine Harris certified an election. You had the Brooks Brother riots down there in Florida where their operatives went in and basically caused a riot and stopped the counting of the ballots. This has been a party that under no circumstances are they willing to have the votes counted. And we're seeing this over and over again. It's not new. It's not new at all. Anyway, back to my labor story in Stephen Greenhouse. I did want to get a couple more things I wanted to get into this before we take our break. Now, if you've got a thought, love to hear it. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. I'm looking at the response of one of the people that he talked to. And as I said, we're at a moment of organizing where we've come through a pandemic. Workers are angry. We're seeing a lot of resignations. The great resignation is happening. If those people had unions, I think those would be strikes, which would be a massive wave. I haven't seen the kind of labor organizing that I would like to see. I haven't seen the kind of visionary movement. And he quotes, a labor historian that I think was kind of interesting. This historian basically said, look, the reality is there are 3 main reasons that you've seen this happen. And it's because as they put it, today's labor leaders were, she believed, constitutionally incapable of building something big, of being bold and ambitious. He writes, she said that after decades of being on the defensive, of being beaten down by hostile corporations, hostile GOP lawmakers, and hostile judicial decisions, many labor leaders seem unable to dream big or think outside the box on how to attract large numbers of workers in ways beyond the traditional one workplace at a time union drives. And the thing is, I would argue it's not just union leaders, it's actually workers as well. I think workers have gotten the idea that they're helpless, that it's too hard of a lift, it's too difficult of a climb to join and form unions because the laws are so badly broken and the pendulum has so badly swung to the side of corporations that they don't even try. And there's a lot of truth in that. And this is where I keep coming back to. At some point, we're going to find some visionary labor leader, and it may be the new guy who's going to be in at the Teamsters in March. It may be somebody. It may be something that hasn't even developed yet, but they're going to take advantage of the moments of social media, of outrage, of the opportunities and the want of people to come together. As I've been saying, politically, I think a lot of our problems could be solved with a stronger labor movement. Politically, I think a lot of our problems could be solved by people having contracts and in the workplace dealing with some of these problems and actually seeing some resolve, and then building political power to move in a direction that makes people's lives better. I think that's a way that we need to go. But as Stephen points out, there has been a big decline in labor over the years, and it's not surprising that you have people who are stuck in the old ways. This is how we've always done it. He points out that there are 3 reasons that the American labor movement has declined. He says, first, corporate America's fierce resistance to unions. Second, the decades-long slide in factory jobs. And third, the Republican Party's decades-long fight to weaken unions and make it tougher to unionize. I agree with all that. I would add a fourth, a media culture that continually fuels the negative stereotypes about workers and their unions is front and center. And that goes, in my view, with the corporate resistance and the Republicans. So you could split that into both of those two because, well, corporate America is who funds right-wing radio, who funds right-wing media. And one of their core central values is, well, big business, free markets. And they see unions as an infringement on their freedom. Because why should you have to treat somebody decent? Why should you have to pay someone a reasonable wage? Why should people have health insurance or retirement security? Why should that be there? Which is why we've seen a massive decline in those things. And we haven't hit that breaking point just yet, but we're getting there. You hear the mainstream media all the time saying, people love their health insurance. Do they? I've yet to meet anyone who said, look, if they expanded Medicare and I got the exact same benefits I have now or better, that I would turn them down for my employer-sponsored health care. I've met nobody who says that. The fear is, and this is a very real fear, the fear is you end up with a Donald Trump or a Republican in office who then starves the benefit. And then you have problems. So I'm on a certain level, I'm not surprised by that. But for the most part, most people I know anyway, they would immediately go to a Medicare for all system in order to make sure that they have the health care that they need at a lower cost. It's that simple. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Got a quick minute here to grab one more call. We've got Rick on line 3. Rick, what's on your mind, buddy?
Hey, so y'all were talking about the election fraud. I was just kind of wondering why everybody ends up following some letter of the alphabet. I mean, that's just crazy. That's what kind of led all up to this.
Explain that. What do you mean by letter of the alphabet?
Well, I think, was it 17th or whatever? Everybody's following that letter. I think it's R, like letter R. Or was it N? Wait a minute. No, Q. Everybody's like following somebody named Q.
Okay.
And they're all ticked off for some reason. I don't know what this guy's doing that's making everybody so mad, but I think that's what they were saying why everybody was pissed off that day, and they were heading to the election. Somebody, I don't know if the guy, was he supposed to be speaking that day?
Q. No, Trump was supposed to be speaking that day. Are you talking about January 6th?
Yeah, January 6th. I mean, they said that Q was speaking at the Capitol that day. Wasn't everybody there pissed off because of that? Was they mad because he didn't show up?
No, they were riled up because Trump told them that their election was stolen and got them to believe it and pointed them in that direction. Lathered them all up and pointed them in the direction. The Q kooks, I think that's a whole nother discussion.
Okay, so
thanks, Rick. Appreciate it, man. Good stuff. No, I mean, look, the Q crazies that have been out there, and I know a bunch of them. They have, they've got their point of view. I think it's a little off the beaten path. But interestingly enough, they've been fairly quiet here lately, especially as more stuff has been coming out about Trump, and they're starting to wake up that they were kind of duped. So that does give me hope. It gives me hope that people can wake up and be decent. Just my thoughts. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on his view on what the president had to say today. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That was the day that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave a speech that would become one of the defining moments of his presidency. The world was embroiled in the Second World War. Debates raged about whether the United States should enter the conflict. At this critical time, Roosevelt delivered his State of the Union address. It became known as the Four Freedoms speech. In it, President Roosevelt proposed 4 fundamental freedoms that should be shared by everyone in the world. They included the freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and the freedom from fear. Freedom of speech and freedom of worship had long been enshrined in the United States Constitution. But by declaring that people deserved freedom from want and fear, Roosevelt was charting new ground. It was this belief that undergirded his New Deal policies aimed at helping those devastated by the Great Depression. In his speech, Roosevelt declared that there were basic expectations by the people of the United States. They included jobs for those who can work, security for those who need it, the ending of special privilege for the few, the preservation of civil liberties for all, the enjoyment of the fruits of scientific progress in a wider and constantly rising standard of living. He then called for an increase in pensions, unemployment insurance, and access to medical care and jobs. In 1943, after the United States had entered the war, the Saturday Evening Post published a series of paintings by Norman Rockwell portraying each of the 4 freedoms outlined in the speech. The paintings by the popular artist helped to spread the idea of the freedoms to the American public. It's worth asking how far we've come in realizing these 4 freedoms today. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I've got to go back to the Matt Gaetz statement. And as we've been saying all day, it's not surprising that Gaetz and Green and the Republicans are where they are in this moment. Not surprised at all that they're taking it's a matter of pride now that they have that January 6th happened. Matt Gaetz said, we're ashamed of nothing. We're proud of the work we did on January 6th, and we're actually going to walk the grounds that patriotic Americans walked from the White House to the Capitol. They are, in full, saying it out loud mode, no longer going to say it in the cloakroom. This is who they are. It's predictable. And here to share some thoughts on, that comment and all of the other stuff from today, I've asked our good friend Bob Ney to come talk with us. Bob is a former Ohio congressman and political analyst. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So what do you think of the Matt Gaetz comment? What do you think of, we're proud of it, we're ashamed of nothing?
Well, it's terrible in many ways, but let me also point out something else. When 911 was occurring and the police officers were, helping 10,000 some people get out of the congressional complex, with the House and the Senate, Rick. And after that, we had anthrax brought into the building and ricin, attacks. Obviously, people send their loved ones to the Capitol, put the members aside. 10,000 some people, staffers, they're sent to the Capitol by spouses and parents and brothers and sisters, expecting that they will return alive from that Capitol. And anyone that serves there, and Gaetz and Taylor, I just can't fathom, anyone that serves there has to have a feeling of responsibility. I served there, that it's part of also our obligation that we do everything to protect the staff. The people who give it their all to keep the system going.
Yeah, but
I'm
going to stop you right here.
We're going to take a stroll around the Capitol, and we're not ashamed of what happened. Yeah, and they have forget the other members for a second. They have, Rick, no regard for human life when it comes to the innocent people, Capitol Hill Police, the staff that serve in that building.
No, of course not, because they don't believe in it. They have no
Nothing.
No faith in the system. They don't believe in any part of the system. In fact, they'll tell you they'd happily tear it down. So it's not surprising to me a bit that they're proud of what happened, and they don't care about themselves. Why would they care about somebody else?
People died. More people could have died. We are fortunate more people didn't die, and they know that. And so at least they could recognize. I mean, they can hold to the election was stolen, the big lie. They can hold to that if they want all day long. How can they ignore the fact of the violence that occurred there? Forget the insurrection against the Constitution even for a second, but the human violence that occurred. How can they possibly ignore it and look those people in the face every day, that serve there to help the whole country?
Yeah. Well,
staff.
I've often asked, and I just asked this earlier, I wonder what would have happened had the mob actually gotten a hold of a Congress member. It doesn't matter which party. It could have been a Republican for all we know. What would have happened to that representative? Let's say one of the ones from Idaho that nobody knows who they are. They don't get on Fox News at night. Would they be swinging from one of those gallows? Is that what have happened on this day a year ago?
It could have, and they could have been hurt. They wouldn't stop. This mob wouldn't have stopped the rage of this mob. They wouldn't have stopped a staff person and said, "Hey, which party do you work for?" They would have just went after him because it was a symbol of the building. It was a symbol of what they thought was going on. The big steal. And yes, you're right. They could have grabbed members too. But if Getz and Marjorie Taylor Greene don't care, about their own colleagues, at least have some consideration for the innocent, people that work in that building.
Yeah, their staff. You're right about that.
Wow.
I did want to get your thoughts on President Biden's speech today. I thought this was by far the most powerful speech he gave. At least in this year in his presidency, and I thought it was an important one. Your thoughts?
This is a speech that, when you think of things that have happened in the course of our country, the 9/11 speech, Obama's speech after the school shootings, Reagan's speech, the Challenger. When you think of the speeches that just, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a day that'll live in infamy, this is right up there. This is probably one of the finest speeches, absolutely, I've ever seen Joe Biden give. It was powerful. It was on target. It was extremely well delivered. But on top of it, he personalized it. This was fascinating, I think, psychologically, because he said, "What do you see? People listening to him. A mob. They were breaking windows, kicking in doors. And what else did you see?" And then he said, "What did you not see?" And then he brought Trump in the most extremely appropriate but yet aggressive and on-point way, that instead of just saying Trump and making it a Biden-Trump thing, he just turned the whole persona, psyche, ego, narcissism of Trump and just threw it out there in such a way that you had to say, wow. I thought it was amazing.
No, I thought it was the shot that had to go out. He had to come out and say, not only is the former guy a former guy, he's a defeated former guy. I think that had to be said.
Well, and it was done in such a way, in a very bright way, where he didn't say Trump for a reason, but he referred to him. And it's not because he didn't want to say his name. He just put it in a way that could make people see, I think, a lot of things. And you're right, he did need to do it. He couldn't just go up there and say, well, this was a terrible day and we can't ever have this happen again. He had to lay it out on the line, and I thought he did it in a way that was so appropriately done, for the moment and for the anniversary of this.
Yeah. Now the right-wing outrage machine, all I got from them was, they're politicizing this date, and this wasn't even a big deal. Because look, the right, tried to minimize this, and in fact, Republicans didn't do anything. I mean, I think the only two that showed up at the House was Liz and Dick Cheney.
Right. some of the statements were interesting. McConnell and some of the other, people, some of the statements. But right, I think the only two that did show up was Cheney.
McConnell did make a statement, but didn't say anything about the guy responsible.
Right, exactly, right.
So where do you see this going from here? Is this the end of it? Do you think things, because I see the Republicans just continuing on this, nothing happened, business as usual. Does this matter, do you think? Does this anniversary matter? Does this speech matter?
Well, three different paths here, I think, Rick. Number one, the speech by the president so nailed it that he had to have invoked a lot of emotion, not in a hateful way, but in a very appropriate, no-nonsense way. And he had to give, I think, some hope, out there. And he marked the day appropriately for what it was and what we need to remember about it. So that's the one path. The second path is a different path. That's the committee, and where it goes from here. But the first path is the president, and it sets the tone. And then I think the third path then becomes activism on voting rights and trying to make sure that people do work together. Look, we've got boards of elections that a lot of people, both sides of the aisle, and this is a lot of good local boards of elections people. And I would hope it's incumbent upon them to work together to try to make sure the elections are fair.
Yeah, but here's my fear, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Congress to make sure.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because here's my fear, Bob. Steve Bannon has talked about this at length. The taking over of those boards. That he wants the most extreme of the extreme taking that stuff over, because they're the defenders of the right to vote or the sanctity of the ballot box, or however he put it. But their push now is going to be to take over those roles with the idea that they're going to be the ones who are the arbiter of who can vote and who cannot. And I see lots of chaos on the local level, because I don't think Democrats are ready for what's coming, not this election, but the next one.
Well, they're going to attempt to do it through also the elections of secretaries of state who will be sympathetic to them. That will include putting out some Republican secretary of states out of their jobs.
Right.
They'll attempt to.
Like the guy in Georgia.
There's a definite plan for that, because they can't just go take over every board of elections. They need the secretary of state's level, because that's, as you know, that's a big part of the decision making is what the secretary of state does in the states. So they will definitely have a plan for that. I think, personally, that, yes, the Democrat side has to get aggressive, and they have to be prepared for this, and they have to also push for, like the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, in pieces of legislation. But also on top of it, I think that, they have to, the Democratic side has to get it, I said this before on your show, get its mantra together. And go out there and sell the ideas that it has about what it's going to do for the average, working people in this country. I think that's going to be important. The Republican side, I shouldn't say the Republican side, but the people who want to repeat ad nauseum, the election was stolen, and just go on and on with this. Some of that will wear thin at some point in time. Some of that will wear thin. And the internal struggle of the Republicans trying to take other Republicans out of office could very well take its toll.
Yeah, that is my hope in all of this.
It could.
But here's my problem. I mean, I was just looking at this ABC Ipsos poll that says that faith in the American electoral system and the integrity of the system, only 20% say that they're very confident in the system. That's a problem for me.
Yes. Sure. And hopefully there's something legislatively that, can help to reinstill that. That's why we did it years back, a coalition of Republicans and Democrats trying to restore some confidence in the election process after Gore versus Bush.
Yeah. Now, you actually wrote the Help America Vote Act, right?
Right. I was the author of Help America Vote Act. My main Co-sponsor was Steny Hoyer. And in the Senate, you had Ted Kennedy, Mitch McConnell, Ted Kennedy together, and Chris Dodd. Those were the three main proponents. We brought in the advocacy groups. We brought in, a lot of people. I had conservatives come up to me saying, "What on earth's wrong with you? How could you do this?" And we kept taking our issue, to the membership and then to the secretaries of state and to the election officials, and we grew the support and we passed it. Now, since that time, are there changes? Sure, in the country. It's like anything, you have to retweak things. But at the time, I think we did a lot to address the issue of this country being ripped apart over Gore versus Bush.
Yeah. Do you think that bill would pass today?
What they tried to do in the Capitol, but just ripped apart with the attitude.
Yeah, but do you think that bill could pass today?
Oh, absolutely not. No.
At least you're honest.
Oh, no. I mean, we spent 2 years on it, and we worked, and with everybody under the sun that we could. But today, in this environment, I mean, you'd have to force the bill. You'd have to do something. I think you'd have to do a bill like that in reconciliation.
Do you think that's possible?
Well, if it has reconciliation with a parliamentarian of the Senate,
it's got to be monetary. Yeah.
If you got a monetary cost to it, you're in. And people can say, well, that's an ugly way to do things. Well, that's the system they have because they have the antiquated cloture filibuster.
Yeah, see, this is where the difference between a Democrat and a Republican come into play. You, as a former Republican, understand that when you have the power, you use the power.
Sure.
Democrats haven't figured that out yet.
You have to get aggressive, and if you want to make a change, you have to make that change happen. And if it has to happen in reconciliation, the thing that will happen is that the Republicans will say, Schumer, as leader of the Senate, you are such an abuser of power. Look what you've done, the worst power abuse in America's history. And meanwhile, guess what? A bill will pass that will have the ability to say that's a discriminatory practice. It's anti-voting. It's anti-democracy. Justice gets to take a look at it. So which do you want? Some criticism from Mitch McConnell, or do you want to do something that makes the general citizenship feel a little bit better about their society?
I still say we need to get you a job at the DNC.
Well, they don't listen to me much, but...
But we will see where this takes us. But Bob, as always, great stuff. I appreciate you sharing some thoughts with us and your vast knowledge. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Rick.
No, seriously. I mean, somebody needs to show them where the key is and how to turn on the steamroller and learn how to run it down the road. Something we absolutely, without question, need to learn how to do. And in this moment, on this day, the thing that I keep coming back to is the fact that something has to happen here very soon. Something on the voting rights has to happen. Call your representatives, call your senators, call other people's senators, especially Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. We need comprehensive voter reform to make sure that there are no roadblocks, that people don't have to leap tall buildings, that we don't have to swim the English Channel to get to the voting booth, that we make it accessible and easy for working people to get to. Seems very simple to me, but we got to get something passed. That's my view. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, as I said, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you follow us on social media at Rick Smith Show on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all of that. All kinds of places to interact. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. 2013 saw the end of what may have been the longest hotel strike in history. On Father's Day 2003, 130 workers from the Congress Hotel on Michigan Avenue in Chicago walked off the job. They were protesting a reduction in wages and the hotel's hiring of minimum wage subcontractors. For 10 years, the strikers, led by Unite Here, picketed the hotel. The hotel management remained unmoved. Unite Here quietly ended the strike, but that was not the longest strike in history. Not by a long shot. On this day in 1961, barbers' assistants in Copenhagen, Denmark, ended their strike. They had first walked off the job in 1928. And the Guinness Book of World Records has declared the strike the longest in recorded history. Every strike or work stoppage has its own character. A strike may be as short as just a portion of a day, or a strike may last for weeks, months, or years. Sometimes union members call strikes to last a specific amount of time, usually a few days. Other times, union members vote for an open-ended strike, with the duration uncertain. The tactic of a strike is one of the most extreme measures a union can take. Usually, a strike means that all other efforts to gain a fair contract have been exhausted. Long strikes have become less common in recent years. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there were only 15 major work stoppages in 2013. Of these, 2/3 lasted 3 days or less. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.